Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024 special meeting of the Warwick School Committee. Tonight, the school committee has been convened to review the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. At this time, I ask that you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. For those of you in the audience, members of the public, and for those watching from home or will watch from home later on, a quick review of the process. So this evening, the school committee will review the proposed budget from the superintendent. It's my thought that this committee will pass the budget this evening. What I want to say is that regardless of whatever we do here this evening, the next step in the process would be that the mayor develops his fiscal year 2025 budget, which includes our request or a dollar amount that he would allocate to the school system. That figure is then passed on to the city council. We will be heard on May the 20th at the city council chambers, and that is when they will decide if they will fully fund what the mayor has allocated to the school system or if there will be a different dollar amount. After that, if there is an amended amount, positive or negative, our budget will be then heard during the regular June meeting of the school committee, and at that time we will either have to make amendments to the budget that we pass here this evening, or we will just accept the increase in money that is being allocated to us. The other comment that I will make this evening is that a part of our budget, or a part of the budget that is put together by the superintendent and our director of finance, Mr. Bull, there is a estimate as to what will be given to us from the state. At this time, the governor's budget is still in its proposed form, and it has not been passed by the General Assembly. So that stated, those dollar amounts could fluctuate either positive or negatively. So we will go through the budget this evening. All of the functional leaders within our administration will go through what their requests are. We will hear them, and then one by one, starting all the way down at the end with Ms. Backus to myself, we will then ask questions, make comments, request amendments, etc., and then ultimately decide what we do with the budget from there forward. So with that, before we get into public comment, I'll just turn it over to my colleagues if they have any comments on the budget process. Mr. Tessa, do you want to make your annual statement on revenue?
I won't make it until we know what we've got.
Perfect. So with that stated, at this time we'll turn it over to members of the public who are wishing to make public comment on agenda items and agenda items only. Individual comments will be respectfully limited to 3 minutes per person, with public comment not to exceed 45 minutes. Though the content of comments will not be restricted, it is the hope of the committee that the citizens, committee members, and administration alike will be respectful of each other's right to speak, tolerant of different points of view, and mindful of everyone's time. This public comment period is for agenda items only. A second public comment session is available later in the meeting for all other topics or concerns. Members of the public are permitted to speak during both public comment periods. Speakers are asked to state their name for the record. Thank you.
Hello, Darlene Netco, lifelong resident of Warwick, homeowner, taxpayer, voter, graduate of Warwick Public Schools. I currently teach English at Tollgate High School. I've been teaching for 36 years, and I am president of the Warwick Teachers Union. And I've been to many budget hearings over the years. Some have gone multiple days till midnight. Some haven't lasted as long. If it would be great if everything could be taken care of tonight, so the budget can be sent to the mayor and it can get in front of the city on May 20th, and hopefully the city council will vote for what the schools need to get. As far as a message to the school committee, please think carefully before amending too much or cutting too much. Just as a reminder for those of you who maybe are new, way back in 2008, 2009, around that period of time during the Great Recession or mini recession, whatever it was, the legislature in Warwick, not in Warwick, in Rhode Island passed a one-time piece of legislation to allow cities and towns to underfund schools by up to 5% below maintenance of effort. This is my yearly reminder. Warwick was the only city or town in the state to cut the full 5% and never give it back. So since that time, about 2009, 2010, really the schools have been underfunded. During that period of time, Warwick also was the only city or town in the country, as Mr. Nadeau, rest his soul, used to say, was charging the interest on the bond for improvements to the schools. So our school department had to put, I think it was like $1.5 million into the budget to pay the interest on this bond. And that's before anything else in the schools were funded. So really, our schools have been underfunded, and any money that they're asking for over last year is money that's owed the schools. Of course, in looking at the budget, I see that there have been WTU positions cut, and I would urge no positions ever to be cut. We need all the people that we need in the classroom, and I mean, you're cutting some WISE positions too, and you shouldn't be cutting those either. We need TAs and so on in the classrooms. It's a complicated process to put together a budget. I appreciated this time. I know you have in your documents that I was invited.
30 seconds.
Okay, I was invited to sit down to get a preview of the budget. So I do appreciate that. And just a reminder, at this time of year, we all need to work together to remind the city how important the schools are and that it costs money to run the schools. And we are a service-driven part of the budget, and you need people in the classrooms and so on and so forth in order to provide this service. I had an argument with a fellow here once, you know, do we want to put 500 kids in this auditorium and have one teacher on a video screen for them? No, we do not. So it's going to cost money. The state, Mr. Testa will bring that up at some point, the state needs to properly fund us. The city needs to properly fund us. And so at this time of year, as you look at the budget and get ready to pass the budget and consider what the administration has put forward, remember that the administration has spent a lot of time working on this and has brought to you the budget that they need to run the schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public wishing to comment? Any other members of the public wishing to comment? Any other members of the public wishing to comment? Seeing none, we'll move into agenda item C, unfinished business, discussion action, FY25 superintendent recommended budget. I believe they have a presentation, so we'll move on down there. Thank you. Oh, before we head on down there, Superintendent Danbrook has a statement.
Dear Chair of the School Committee and School Committee members, members of the community, our administrative team has put together a budget for FY25 that meets two high-level goals: to fund the WISE and WTU contracts that we have worked so hard to negotiate over the past year, and to continue investing in student programming, curricula, technology, and classroom materials. This is one of the best ways to ensure our students are receiving the education they deserve. We spent the past few months crafting a budget that meets both of those goals. This process involved the following: budget managers submitting their non-staffing expense requests, All requests were compiled and compared to the FY24 asked by the budget managers so we can see where the major increases were. A central office review team was made up of myself, Assistant Superintendent McCaffrey, Director of Technology Jeff Taylor, Director of Human Resources Kim Ruggieri. The team met with directors, budget managers, one-on-one to do an initial review of the budget requests. This process was led by Finance Director Brandon Bowl, who did a fabulous job. Thank you, Brandon. The central office review team then made some cuts to the individual budget managers' requests. Based on these initial meetings, we then made the budget managers a second time to review the cuts and make additional edits to the budget based on our round of conversations that we've had. The central office review team then compiled all personnel requests and considered the impact of hiring or reducing headcount on the overall budget. Additions seemed necessary, were kept in the budget. The team then spent several days deciding how to reduce the headcount in order to balance the budget. It is very important for everyone to remember that we staff according to need. From the beginning of the budget preparation process, we cut approximately $11.3 million out of the original ask of the budget. This leaves a budget of $190.6 million. Our request from the city is $142.3 million, which is a 3.25 increase over last year's request. Our ask of the city is $4.5 million increase to the FY25 superintendent's proposed budget. As we build two new high schools and look to the future, it is so important to continue to invest in the people and the program in our district today. We want the best. We're going to have the best high schools, and we want to continue investing in our programs. Again, I'd like to personally thank all of the budget managers. You worked so hard, and you had a commitment to be fiscally responsible. Also, Mr. Bowl, you organized a great process, so thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Danbrook. At this time, we'll turn it over to you and your administrative team to facilitate the presentation.
I think it's on. Yep. Yes. We're good to go. You good? Good evening. So a lot of what I'm going to say here might be a little bit redundant following the superintendent's message, but I just thought it was important to highlight some of the main points from our process, which basically started in December, January in building this budget. So there was a central office review team made up of the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, myself, the director of technology, and the HR director. Again, we met with budget managers at least twice each, and then some of them a third or fourth time in order to find additional cuts within the budget. The non-staffing piece of the budget, I specifically requested from budget managers to put together their ideal scenario for the year. So the initial request from all budget managers across the district was $47.3 million. Through the rounds of conversations that the administrative team had with those budget managers, we were able to bring that non-staffing request down to $40.3 million, so cutting $7 million off the budget right off the bat. Once we got through the staffing piece, the non-staffing piece, which covers programs and curriculum, we needed to really get to a number for staffing that both covered the costs of the WISE and WTU contracts that were negotiated over the past year, while also considering a few other moving pieces, such as the ESSER-funded positions within the district that now need to move on to the general fund as they were previously grant funded. We made some decisions around staffing, which are shared in the overview file in the open folder, which I'm sure we'll talk about tonight. We then presented both the staffing and non-staffing pieces of the budget to school committee members, both heads of the WISE and WTU unions, and met with the mayor and the city finance director this past week to present our superintendent's budget. These, again, Lynn or the superintendent, apologies, presented these numbers during her speech, but just wanted to put them out there for the public. The request from City Council is a 3.25% increase over their appropriation from last year, which in dollar terms is about $4.5 million. Again, the goal is to fund the WISE and WTU contracts while also increasing our non-staffing budget year over year. We think of, this is a little bit of an aside, but we think of the budget itself as being in two pieces. Again, the non-staffing being curriculum and programming for students and staff, and the staffing portion of the budget, which is compensation, benefits, which is the bulk of the expenses within the district. So again, the staffing increase year over year is about a $3.7 million increase from the fiscal year 24 budget. That's about a 2.5% increase. That helps, or that represents the raises that are being offered to both unions, but also takes into consideration some of the headcount reduction that is recurring within the district. The non-staffing piece of the budget, we're asking for about $1 million more than the fiscal year 24 budget. Again, the non-staffing piece of the budget represents what the students experience in the classroom, and so it is important for us to maintain increases year over year so that students they're gaining something from the non-staffing piece of the budget, and it's not just flat funded or level funded year over year. So again, this represents a 2.5% increase over fiscal year 24's budgeted amount for non-staffing expenditures. These are a couple of the constraints that we just had to work around during the budget process for fiscal year 25. There's a loss of ESSER funding, so the district received about $20 million a few years ago that was to be spent over 3 years. Those funds have been spent, but 6.2 million of them were recurring in nature, and so we either needed to cut those expenses completely or move them onto the general fund. I think we were very thoughtful in our approach, in that we didn't just say, all right, they were ESSER expenses, so they need to go. We found ways to accommodate those expenses on the general fund. We're receiving almost level funding from the state. So year over year, we've got a 0.5% increase from the state. To the chairman's point about the state of the state's budget, it is just a proposed budget. The number will be finalized over the next couple months, but hopefully we receive a little bit more of an increase over our current estimate. And then the lunch fund deficit, which I don't think we've necessarily considered year over year as part of the budget, but we talk about it at every school committee meeting. It grows at $15,000 to $20,000 a month, and so we really need to start to consider this as an expense of the district, considering that the balance needs to be paid by the general fund going forward. So we're estimating about $250,000 to $350,000 in lunch debt per year, so we considered that during our budget process as well. That being said, I know in prior years we've had presentations from individual budget managers, but we've presented the fiscal year 25 budget to the school committee as of the April 1st deadline, and so I think we're open to entertaining questions from the school committee at this time, which the individual budget managers or myself can help answer.
So just to keep everything organized and nice, easy flow, I figured what we'll do is we'll just make our way down, starting with Representative Backus, and in case she has any questions, comments, concerns, or amendments, and then going every individual thereafter all the way down, and then we'll decide what we'll do thereafter. So, Ms. Backus, anything for the administration?
You call me representative. That's somewhere I never want to go. This is it. I'm very concerned that we're not asking for at least a full 4%. We could ask for more. We're leaving over $1 million on the table with the city. We're in the position that we're in because the city cut us and didn't fund us for many, many years in the late 2000s and into between 2010 and 2017. I don't think that we can afford to lay off teachers or TAs. There may be a couple of TAs whose jobs will end because the children are going out of state, and they may be picked up because we'll get new children. But it's very, very concerning, and I think we have to ask for what we need, and then the city can do their due diligence, and they can make a decision based on what our need is. And I just find it very, we need to push that up beyond 3.25. I think we need to go to a full 4% ask and no layoffs. I mean, I've heard people talking about kilns. How can we have kilns when we're going to have layoffs? How can we have kilns when we're going to lose TAs and teachers and lots of other things that our kiddos need? What's the priority? I would consider kilns if we got more money. I want them for our kids, at least at some level, which would be at least middle school at this point, where they would have it, where we would have them, and so that the majority of children going through the system could experience ceramics and things like that. You know, we've been fighting for so many years, and it's just like I said during negotiations for the teachers and the TAs and the folks in WISE. And the city does not consider the schools as part of the city for the purpose of budgeting. So they live flush. The benefits that city employees get are very good. They get pensions when they retire. They get COLAs when they retire. We don't have a large OPEB issue because all the money for pensions, as far as our teachers and WTU folks, is administered by the state. I think we really need to change the dynamics, and we need to make the city know. I don't know how we do that. I'm open to suggestions, but how do we help the city to understand that we are one city, that everyone deserves decent conditions, decent salaries, decent benefits, and that you can't look at one or two groups and say, well, they work for us, so, you know, we can give them whatever we want, and then we'll find the money for the city side. But when it gets to the city side schools, which is really probably the most important department in the city, because we educate students. And there's nothing more important than education. And if we're going to do it right, we need to fund it right. So, I can't get on board with this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Backus. This time, District 2 Representative, Ms. Hazelwood.
Everything Karen said, I agree with. I think that every department here has very tough decisions to make. They have their budgets in front of them, and they have to trim.
Excuse me 1 second, Ms. Hazelwood. You just moved the microphone a
Oh,
little
sure,
closer.
sorry about that. And they have to trim where they don't want to trim. They don't want to not install the kilns. They don't want to cut jobs. They want the same things that we want, but they're caught in the middle of it all. So I am not opposed to asking for more at all. I think the schools deserve it. I think the kids deserve it. We say the kids are important, but how important are they if we always have to shave back for them? And that's not a reference to you. How important are they if we're not willing to put more into education? It should be a priority. I know it is when we have children in our own homes. We want to give them everything they need to thrive. Well, this is a part of that. And they deserve to have what they need in schools to thrive. And people deserve to work in conditions that are healthy, in buildings that are healthy. And Mr. Oliver and Mr. Gothberg are caught behind the 8 ball often with what they can spend. And it's because of all that level funding. Exactly what Ms. Necco said was 100% true, year after year after year. So I'm not opposed to asking for whatever more we may need. And I do applaud you all for doing the tough work, because I would never want to have to sit in your shoes. Never. I applaud all of you. But for sure, we could use more to meet every need and not cut these things that we're forced to cut. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Hazelwood. District 3 Representative Michelle Kerбачap.
I guess, I mean, who can really argue that the schools are underfunded? We do need more money from the state. Those are not even questions. That's definitely facts. I do appreciate this budget was very different from last year. It came to us had a lot of cuts already, which I know couldn't have been easy. So it was really nice to have that kind of already before us. I did ask for an amended budget with the kilns, not because of worrying about cutting, because that's not a priority, not saying that. But so many times with, again, the majority of the budget, was it over 80% goes to salaries? What gets cut from the budget? Stuff for the kids. It's always like the school stuff. So I asked if there was a way that we could still start the kiln process. And I was told that we were able to amend that to at least get the kilns back in the middle school. So Brandon, if you can explain that, please.
Yeah, there was a discussion earlier today amongst the administration to find a plan forward for the kilns within the district. I think part of the discussion focused on the feasibility of doing it within the middle schools. It's the most realistic at that level. There's space available within the high schools for right now. to make six-figure changes to buildings that are going to be demolished in 2 years doesn't seem like a reasonable path of, or just a reasonable action. So at the high school level, for right now, we won't be installing any new kilns. And at the elementary level, again, there's just, it's not as feasible. There's other options like clay projects that they can do that aren't fired in a kiln. And that way, I think the kids actually build up. So they work with air dry clay at the elementary level. And then when they're a little bit older and they're able to use a kiln, which obviously has a lot more safety measures in place, then they can use it at the middle school level. And the new high schools, I believe there are kilns in the designs. I would have to ask Mr. Gothberg when it comes to that, but I do believe there are plans for kilns in the new high schools when they're built.
That is correct.
He confirms that's correct. And we did part of the discussion today was how do we come up with the money for the kilns. So the estimate from the architects for the design and installation of the kilns across the secondary schools was $250,000. So if we're not going to be implementing them in the high schools, we estimate that cost to be $125,000 for the middle schools. So just half the total. We spent yesterday afternoon, the evening, and this morning combing through expenses to try to figure out where we can come up with the funds for that $125,000, and I think we found 3 lines within the budget that we can cut in order to make room for the $125,000. So there is a plan in place in order to implement those kilns within the district.
Yeah, and it's not about what's more important. It's just saying, let's invest in our, like, something for the kids. And art is really important. Why not?
Thank you, Ms. Kirby-Chapman. And at-large representative, Mr. Testa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to make my annual speech, but I will make it. There are people who allege that people up on this stage couldn't read a profit and loss statement, couldn't read a balance sheet, et cetera, et cetera. They're wrong because I can speak for myself. I can read those. There's the same people that say, run this like a business. And you can't. Schools, if we were a business, every business that I know of has the ability to raise revenue. My company, if we need revenue, we raise our prices. Schools don't have the luxury of doing that. We have no ability to raise revenue whatsoever. It's a flawed model. I've been on record saying it for years. And go across the vast majority of the country and you'll find school districts have the authority to tax. That way you control your own destiny. You don't have to go Oliver Twist like every year to your municipality. But when you can't raise your own revenue, you're forced to focus on your expenses. And the only thing you can do is crush them. This district has done that for years. I've been a member of the public and a member of the school committee for many, many years and watched what happened. I will give the current administration credit. I think Mayor Picozzi has been probably the most generous mayor to the schools that I've seen in my 25 years here, and with the support of the council. So that said, I want to thank Mr. Bowl, because while you can't run this like a business, you can apply some business principles to it. And I think Mr. Bowles' perspective coming from outside of municipal finance absolutely made an impact on that, and I appreciate that. And it's valuable, and I think other districts can learn from that. So, having said that, quick question, Mr. Bowl. Roughly, what percentage of the school budget is truly discretionary? Roughly.
Truly discretionary? I mean, not a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the staffing piece is not discretionary at all, right? Those are employees. They're backed by unions. There's 0% flexibility there, especially after you've just signed 2 new contracts with those unions. Within the non-staffing piece of the budget, there's quite a few unfunded mandates that we're still sort of pulling the numbers together for our city council presentation. But it's low. If I had to ballpark it, I'd say less than 10% of it is really
Yeah, I think it's
flexible.
closer to like 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 7% is what you can truly call discretionary. And it's more of a rhetorical question, but it illustrates a point. You know, where you mentioned in your presentation earlier on the ESSER funds. So there are some, I don't want members of the public to think, well, your ESSER funds went away, now you're gonna keep everything you had with ESSER. I know you guys, and you folks went through a lot of work, because not everything that we funded with ESSER is staying.
Yep.
And we didn't have the luxury of doing that. But people need to know that things that ESSER funded were math interventionists, reading interventionists, and other programs that benefited kids. We didn't use our ESSER funds just to go plugging holes in our budget. That's not what we did. So I'm going to have a couple of specific UCOA line questions. I'm just, for my own edification, for some of the public's edification, just to see what's in them. So the first one is 51201 is overtime. We're budgeting a $50,000 increase.
Yep.
Now I know last year, or this current year, we went over budget because we had a lot of work at the end of the summer to get the schools ready.
Yep.
So there's no intention of repeating that because we've sequenced our work in a different way. But are we just assuming that obviously we have new contracts too, so everything goes up a little bit.
Yep.
So are we being safe with that number?
Yeah, so there are going to be summer projects again that are going to require overtime. The hope is that there's less overtime incurred this summer. There are some additions to the maintenance staff for the fiscal year 25 budget as well, which will hopefully curb some of the overtime charges. But in fiscal year 24, we've charged $360,000 to overtime with a budget of $150,000. So we've overspent the budget by $200,000. So there was an obvious need to increase it. So that extra $50,000 is just to cover any increased overtime.
Okay. UCOA 53403, which is essentially NEST.
Yep.
We budgeted an extra $78,000. So I know we still have NEST, and I don't know what the extra is. Is the extra part of the grant that we got for the trainers?
For athletic trainers. So that
Okay.
is the $78,000. Athletic Director Ricks can't be here tonight because of all the athletic events going on in the district. Oh, he is here.
There we go. I didn't see him.
Never mind. But that $78,000 is to cover a full-time, is it 2 full-time athletic trainers? 2 full-time athletic trainers for the district. So that's what that is.
Okay, great. No, I fully support that, by the way, Mr. Ricks. Next item, I'm not sure if it's for you or if it's for Mr. Allenbach or Ms. Barber. 53417, contracted nursing services, is up $155,000. So is that because we have more students requiring the services, or are the services just more money, or is it a combination of both?
So it's twofold. So yes, we have a lot of students that have one-on-one nurses, as well as the increase in price from those agencies.
Okay, and so those, I'm assuming that those kids are not graduating out of the district, they're still in the district, so we have to, okay.
Correct.
All right. 54601 says renting land and buildings. There's an increase, I didn't put the exact dollar amount, but what was that for?
So we're in the process of planning for hopefully some improvements to the athletic fields here at Vets so that the high schools can be using the athletic fields at Vets during the new school construction. We did budget some additional fees for rent in case we need to actually rent space from other districts or municipalities for athletic fields during construction.
Okay, thank you. 56202 gasoline and 56203 diesel. I think we still get our gasoline from the city, right? We
That's
buy it.
correct.
Do we get
Yep.
diesel from the city as well?
Yes.
We do?
We do.
Okay. Does it make sense to explore other options there? And I don't know if there are any.
It's something we can look into. To your point, we do just get charged directly by the city. I'm not actually sure where they source the fuel from at this point, but it is something we can look into.
Okay, Mr. Al, we don't have our own tanks, right? We don't have any underground tanks, which is a whole headache in and of itself.
No, we don't.
Okay, Thank you. 57311, this is for Dr. Taylor. It's tech hardware. There's a big reduction in there. 57311. I can give you the exact amount. Hold on. I'm usually a little better organized than this, but hold on. 57311 has, I'm sorry, it's tech software cost.
Yep,
Sorry.
tech software, yep,
Yeah.
that's what was throwing me off.
All right, it's quite a big reduction, so
Yeah, I'll defer to actually, because I think a lot of the reductions in tech software came from curriculum.
okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dr. Schultz.
So some of the software in the curriculum department, we were able to tentatively cut. It looks like it's definitely going to be cut, obviously, but we went through and we looked at the analytics of usage. Since COVID, we did purchase a lot of different apps, for example, to help bridge us in COVID with the home school connection that we're just not seeing the use right now, that teachers, it's just very minimal, and so we're able to cut down those programs that we don't need. Also, the middle school science teachers are going to be using a new program that you'll see in my budget. They're very excited about it, but with that, we're able to cut down on apps that were complementing the old curriculum that they were using. So it takes a big chunk of change out of there.
Thank you very much. And reviewing the data and seeing what's used and what's not used, that's a business practice. Businesses do that all the time. Just saying. Last UCOA line items, 58101, I think this might be for the superintendent, it's professional fees and dues. There's an increase. I mean, it's not huge dollars, it's just a big percentage.
There is an increase because the professional dues and fees lived in individual budgets, for instance, the other principals' budgets or their administrators' budgets, and just to make it easy and cleaner, we just all put it in one place, which is in my budget.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Bowl, I think this may be for you or Mr. Ricks, not sure. In one of your documents that you sent to us, there was $80,000 in athletic improvements that was being moved to capital reserve fund. So do we know what those are?
So similar to the statement I made earlier about athletic improvements to Vets Middle School, originally we had talked to Mr. Ricks about including those within his budget. But we're currently in discussions with RIDE just to make sure that we're going about things the correct way and setting up a capital reserve fund for the school district, which we have used in past years. And the basics of it are, if you run a surplus in a given year, like we did in fiscal year 23, we should be able to earmark those funds to be used for capital improvements throughout the district going forward. So rather than having Mr. Rick's budget $80,000 for basically capital improvements to athletic fields, let's use the funds we were able to surplus in fiscal year 23 to make those improvements.
Now, you're preaching to the choir with a capital reserve fund.
Yep.
You realize that.
Yeah.
The town of Lincoln put together a tremendous capital reserve fund using housing aid. And it allows them to continually make capital improvements without going out to bond and paying over 20 or 30 years, twice the price for the project.
Yep.
So I have reached out to our elected officials on that a while ago, but haven't heard anything back yet. And the last thing on that would be Mac Labs. It says there's a potential to cut about, I think it was $90K of Mac Minis work.
Yeah, so we had in the budget Mac Labs for both of the middle schools originally budgeted. And if we use Mac Mini, another product from Apple, it actually reduces the cost significantly. So Dr. Taylor, along with his department, tested the Mac Minis in each of the middle schools to make sure that they work. They do, and so I think we were able to cut $90,000. Does that sound right?
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering, it said the potential, so I just didn't know when that time frame was where we either know it does work or doesn't work. But okay.
So those cuts have already been made in the current version of the budget. That's just a stale note
Okay.
in the file.
Thank you. And the very last thing I have is the breakage number. Your breakage number is what, 2.3, 2.4?
2.4.
2.4. And as someone who used to add to the breakage number, It's a high breakage number.
Yep.
And you've indicated to me that you're calculating, you're putting different things in breakage than, in the past, it was typically retirements, right? Anticipated retirements and that kind of stuff. So you have that and then some?
Yeah, so after discussions with some finance directors around the state and other districts, I came to the conclusion that the breakage, we sort of viewed breakage in very strict terms in previous years, where it was, okay, what retirements do we have within the district, and what are the lower step replacements that are filling those positions coming in. So you have a top step teacher earning, just for example's sake, say $100,000. The replacement's $50,000 at step one, so the district saves $50,000 through that retirement, and you multiply that by however many retirements you have to get to your breakage number. But there are circumstances that come up throughout the year as well, where we're able to generate savings, or just managing the budget more tightly in order to surplus funds in other areas, not just salaries. So I think of the breakage number as a number that we're comfortable through retirements and other means within the budget that we'll be able to basically surplus that amount. So as an administrative team, we talked about it. I think it's important to note that once we went through the non-staffing piece of the budget, we put together the staffing piece of the budget to come up with what we think salaries and benefits are going to be for the year. Then that's the point where we started to look at positions and what we would need to reduce within the district in order to get to a breakage number that we're comfortable. Because ultimately we have to present a budget to City Council that is balanced, and so your revenues and your expenses have to be the same. Again, we feel comfortable with $2.4 million in terms of the retirements that we've seen coming in for processing already, along with some of the savings that we've been able to realize in prior years and other lines.
Thank you. And Ms. Ruggieri, I had reached out to you about retirements over the past 5 years. So we have a rough average of what we can expect. So if we haven't baked all of that in yet, that's favorable.
Yep.
I think that's good. Thank you. I'll tell you, as I told you before, the breakage number just scares me, but I'm comfortable with how you're using breakage.
Yeah.
Because other districts was a dumping zone for that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's everything that I have. There was something I just forgot, but I'll save it for the next time. Thank you. I just want to commend all the work that's done. This work isn't easy for any of you, because I know everybody sitting there would always like a little bit more in their budget and would like more things to offer students. And I get that. I think everybody up here gets that. I don't think the ask is unreasonable. I don't. However, you know, I'm a realist too. I'm going to be pragmatic about this. So, I mean, we're one part of this. The city is the other part. So, again, I don't have an issue with the level of the ask. I think the two collective bargaining agreements were more than reasonable. Oh, I have one other question. Now I remember now. Tuitions. In the budget, we have tuitions. Oh my God, how did I forget that? And we're booking or budgeting an increase for tuitions across the board, and that includes out of district, right?
Yep.
But now with the RIAA going to green,
Yep.
is it anticipated that some of those out of district tuitions that maybe today you're going to put in here, we may have reduction in that because we would be bringing kids
Pulling them from other
back
schools.
into our own district?
That's correct.
Okay, and I can understand if you don't have that number yet, because people need to know that this is just what you expect today, right? Tomorrow changes. So to your point about breakage and where you can manage some savings or massage some savings, some people would think, well, it's calculated. There's some machinations going on. But that's not true, because you have to put something together now.
Yep.
And things change. Things change for the better and they change for the worse. And that'll be reflected in what happens here. So you'll report to us once we get that established. Okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Now I am done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. So I have no questions, surprisingly. I've spent the greater part of the month bothering each and every one of you, and I really appreciate the level of work and detail you've all gone to throughout this process. So I want to just thank the members of the administration, Superintendent Danbrook, Assistant Superintendent McCaffrey, Mr. Bowl, and everyone that contributed to this year's proposed budget, all of your diligence over the past several months. I know you guys began this process in late 2023 and have worked very hard throughout all of 2024. So I really thank you for all of the hard work that you've put into this budget in addition to your day-to-day responsibilities. And I know that January and February were very hectic months for us with everything else that was going on with Tollgate, Mr. Oliver balancing, putting together this budget as well as repairing our sites and making sure they could be up and running in, a short period of time. I thank you very much for all of your hard work and in each and every one of you. I agree with the sentiments of all of my colleagues up here, all the way down to Ms. Backus and even to Mr. Testa here. It would be great if Superintendent Danbrook could ask for any figure, and we receive it. There were times when the school department received 58% of the city's total budget, 58%. And Ms. Netko alluded to this in her public comments, that we were one of the only districts statewide to take advantage of the leeway that the state was providing to cities and towns to make drastic cuts. And as a school district, we are still playing catch-up today. And I think we're going to continue to play catch-up for years to come with infrastructure investments into our facilities, curricular investments, and investments into our workforce from a professional development perspective. Unfortunately, the city can only raise so much in taxes each year. And if we're already asking for more than 50% of a maximum tax increase, if we go and ask for any more, I think we might be laughed out of the room, given that the city also has to fund the fire, the police, the DPW, and other essential city services. I would love if we can get so much more. The kids of this city deserve so much more. The teachers of this school district deserve so much more. The administrators who are so creative and innovative could probably elevate this school district significantly if they were giving a blank check, right? But unfortunately, that's not the reality of the situation. We're going to the city with a very, what I would believe is conservative request. However, when they look at the full picture of everything else they have to fund, it's possibly a large request. Nonetheless, we are going to go to the city with the request of the superintendent and the administration. As mentioned during my opening remarks on the budget process, tonight, even if we pass this budget, there's no guarantee we will even receive the requested amount. What would be really sweet is if we received more, right? But again, I'm a realist, and Mr. Testa alluded to it as well. They have other expenses within the city. Furthermore, traditionally, the school committee has cut from the budget during our budget process in the month of April. Tonight, listening to my colleagues up here, not one individual has said, let's make any cuts. So the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the administration has put all their chips on the table. And we're going to go to the city council and the mayor's administration and ask them to support us, the school committee, the administration, the teachers, and the children of Warwick, based on what we feel we need during these tough times when inflation is hitting our budget, when the governor, as Mr. Bowl showed, is essentially almost level funding us. With the rise of multi-language learners and students requiring special services and the governor's proposed budget not helping us out at all at this time. I'm hoping that everybody in the city reaches out to their state representative and senator and asks to support the resolution passed by this school committee back in the month of, I believe it was March or April? April? Yeah, during April. And ask that they revisit the governor's proposed funding formula so that way they can assist us. Because as Mr. Testa pointed out, we cannot generate revenue. We cannot increase tuition on the children. We're a public school system, and we operate based on the funds that we receive. And I'm hoping that my colleagues and I, along with members of the administration, the teachers union, the WISE union, and all individuals within our community rally with us on May 20th in the City Council chambers and ask them to please fund us to the extent which the superintendent and the administration feels is necessary. Yes, we are making cuts. We are making cuts, and as the superintendent had mentioned, and Mr. Bull, the presidents from both respective unions were spoken to about this. The cuts that are being made are never great. You never want to reduce your workforce. But however, there's only $10 in our pocket, and right now we realize we need 11 to run this school district. We gave out very well-deserving raises within the 2 contracts, and those need to be funded now. With respect to the kilns, I was very pointed with the administration, and you know, I'm glad that they're going to fund getting some of those kilns up and running to be compliant and up to code, because the way we've always traditionally closed budgetary shortfalls is by cutting services for our students. But tonight we heard from our Director of Finance, Mr. Bull, a great way of viewing our budget, that we're splitting it in 2. We're looking at staffing and non-staffing. And with Dr. Schultz and her energy and her passion and her great knowledge, as well as Mr. Bull and his ability to work financially through the budget, we're investing in our curriculum. We're investing in our programs. And we're going to attract students back to this city, or retain students within this city. And we're now investing in our infrastructure and building new schools and getting things that were neglected for so long up to par. So I want to thank you all for that and getting creative and finding those funds. So in conclusion, I would just say that is this ideal? And I think I'm going to quote Mr. Testa from probably 2 years ago, and maybe even Ms. Backus. No, this is a terrible system, as Mr. Testa would say. Flawed, yes. We know what we need to run this school system, but we only get a certain portion of that, and that's because we're lumped into all the other expenses of the city. And my comment is that we're still a top 5 school district in the state for enrollment. We're still one of the largest cities in the state, and we need to act like it. And I think that this budget tonight is representative of our needs. It supports the needs of this school district. It supports, more importantly, the needs of the students, and that's what we're all in this for. No matter what your position is, whether you're a school committee member, a member of the administration, a member of the teachers union, the WISE union, etc., or even one of our great bus drivers with First Student, we're in this for the children. And so tonight, this budget, I feel, is representative of that, and I hope it's fully funded by our mayor's administration and the city council. I'll turn it over now to Ms. Danbrook for any final comments, and then I'll ask if there's any other comments from members of the committee, and then we'll do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say that we made some tough decisions, but we always had the students in mind. During this budget process, we prioritized investing in not only students, but teaching and learning and the curriculum. The programs will help us achieve best practices to create modern learning, cultures, and atmospheres, rigorous instruction, and rigorous assessments. We need to move forward in these areas, and the money that we put aside, the money that we did not use for staffing, will help us reach this goal. We also staff according to need. So for instance, if a student is graduating, had a one-on-one assistant, they no longer need a one-on-one teacher assistant because the student isn't here. So we looked at that carefully. We weren't careless with staffing. We were very diligent about choosing, looking at the students, how many students need teacher assistants. Mr. Director, Superintendent Ken McGaffrey, he also, talked to secondary schools, how many of these courses do you need to run? So we have to be fiscally responsible, and we have to staff according to need. So I feel it could be better if we had unlimited funds, but we don't. So we made the best of the funds we had, and we're moving the district in the right direction, getting ready for our new high schools and personalized learning. So I am pleased with this budget, and I would I hope everyone supports it.
Thank you, Superintendent. At this time, I'll take any final comments from members of the committee. Mr. Testa.
If I may, thank you. Three things. What you mentioned, Mr. Chair, about the resolution we passed last week about how I termed the governor got cute with his budget on state aid, that impact us is about $1.7 million. If he had calculated state aid the same way they did it last year, we'd have $1.7 million more from the state, which would make our ask 2.8, which is a whole different kettle of fish going before the city asking for 2.8, right? Two, Mr. Chair, I'll just follow up on the history lesson that Ms. Necco talked about with the cut. When the General Assembly allowed the cities and towns to cut 5%, we did. That legislation said it was for 1 year. City Council got a letter, this is how Rhode Island works, a letter from the Senate President, then Senate President Piva Weed and Speaker Gordon Fox that said, no, that's not what we meant. You can continue to do it. And that sufficed. Only in Rhode Island does that happen. And the third thing I didn't mention in the budget was just transportation. That's pretty much level, but that's a work in progress right now, correct?
We're currently in negotiations with First Student as they submitted a bid to our RFP for transportation services.
And were they the only bidder?
They were the only bidder.
They were the only bidder. I just wanted to make sure the public knows they were the only bidder. Okay.
Yep.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Any other comments from members of the committee? Okay. Ms. Backus.
Again, I have concerns, especially for perhaps the TAs are aging out, but we're going to need a lot of those people back, so hopefully we'll rehire them. But if that's not in the budget, how are we going to handle that? I mean, I know we've hired quite a few this year when the needs arose. But I'm also very concerned about the cuts to the teachers, the 15 cuts, and I don't know how you do that. It's
Mr. Bolt.
So I would just say, for the public's edification, when we were going through staffing cuts, it wasn't just a blanket, we need to lay off 15 teachers. And the majority of these are not true layoffs. A number of them, I think it's 10 or 11, are retirements that are not going to be replaced. There's about 4 true layoffs within that number, 15. Maybe closer to 6, but a number of those reductions to the WTU number are retirements that are simply not being replaced.
If I can comment as well, it's Mrs. Cousineau.
Yes, Ms. Cousineau.
A number of the cuts are elementary cuts as well, because that has to do with class size. So right now with kindergarten at 22 and grades 1 through 5 at 26, the cohorts of kids move up. Some kids move out, some kids move in. So right now it's staffing cuts, but per the superintendent, myself, if kids move in over the summer or the numbers shift and change, then obviously we would open up new sections. So it looks like cuts right now, but that makes me a little nervous too. But I've been assured that, as the numbers grow, the teachers will be reinstated.
Anything else, Ms. Backus?
no, thank you.
No, great. I would just, on Ms. Backus's point, I share her feelings on the reductions, but one thing that I find promising is that this body, in 5-0 votes, multiple times over the last 6 to 7 months, has approved unbudgeted TAs. The moment the need arises, it's been immediately put before us. And so I take great pride in all 5 of us on this stage not worrying about the dollar at that moment. So I think as we get into the budget here, hopefully it gets approved at the full amount we're asking for. But when we get into fiscal year 2025, if we see that we might not need as much in overtime, we could hopefully transfer money over maybe another line item might be beneath budget, and we can transfer money over, and we can hire based on needs as we get going, because we do have those approximations right now, but as we all know, we're going to be still enrolling children all the way up until August the 27th, and maybe beyond that for those first 2 weeks. So there might be a need. I think our last meeting we approved another one-to-one TA in the month of April. So yeah, it's unfortunate that we can't just retain everybody, but you know, obviously we have to look at the data and the information that's being provided to us by the administration, and right now this gives us that opportunity. And then, as mentioned, I believe of the 11 WTU, those are through attrition, not necessarily just saying, hey, we can't have you anymore because of budgetary reasons. So, are there any other? Yes, Ms. Beck.
Mr. Bowl, on the busing, on the transportation issues,
Yep.
right now we're at about 12 million. What are they seeking?
So within the RFP that we wrote for transportation services, we actually put a cap on it, sort of a double-edged sword, where we said that we want the proposal to be within 4% of our spend in transportation, or the increase in transportation cost to be capped at 4% of whatever our spend has been. The downside to that is that the only bidder who responded is our current transportation provider, so they're going to raise their rates by 4%. So not the ideal outcome, but it at least controls the cost increases that we receive from bidders.
So they get to ask for 4%.
Yeah, so
And we're only going to
again,
ask for 3.25.
Yeah,
and
we're-
transportation's expensive.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of issues with First Student. I know they're the only game in town that can
Yep.
serve a district as large. I mean, and I know that we were hoping that we could deal with 2 different companies and maybe bring things down, but obviously it didn't work out. But transportation is one of those things that,
Yeah, and we're part of the negotiations with them right now is to address the issues that we've had with transportation within the district, and we would like some of those things resolved through the contract so that it's actually binding. You know, we can't just take vendors at their word all the time in terms of, you know, these are the services we're going to provide. We actually need it put in legal form, so that's sort of what we're seeking through the negotiation process.
I mean, kids being picked up 2 hours late,
Yeah.
kids
And-
getting home at 5:30.
Yeah.
You know, that's just, and for, you know, there's all kinds of issues like that. You know that. I know that. And that upsets parents and caretakers, as well it should. Makes them nervous. Where's my little one? No, they're not home yet.
Yep.
And if we can't depend on, and like, we're caught between a rock and a hard place, but it really concerns me about the service that the company provides or has provided, especially for the past few years. It's gone downhill. And back when,
Ms. Backus, one moment.
My mic, I can't get it to work here, but I just want to make sure we're staying on topic with the agenda as far as the
Yep.
budget goes.
but it's a lot of money, and I don't think we get the bang for our buck. So I don't know if there's something we can do in a new contract to make sure that we get the bang for the buck and to make sure that it's efficient and clean and kids get picked up properly and dropped off at proper times and all of that. The other thing I want to ask about, so far as busing, is that some teachers have come to me about field trips, and they say they have to pay $3,500 for a bus, for a single bus, for a field trip, and that they can't leave until after school is started, and they have to get home back to the school before the school day is over. Now, is that true or not? And why, is it true that it's $3,500? And is it true that it's in compressed hours?
Again, I just want to make sure that we're staying on topic.
No, but it's about money. It's about money, and it's about education, and it's about field trips, which are,
It has to be aligned to
Okay. Well, okay, it's right here. 52000. So what is the issue with buses for field trips and our kids' education?
This is the first time I've become aware of any sort of issues around field trips. But if it is an issue, it's something we could address.
Can you find out?
Sure.
Appreciate that. Because that's, when you build in field trips that are part of a child's education, and then if a school bus is just so expensive that they don't get to experience that piece of the education that the teacher and that everybody's developed as the curriculum.
Yeah, I'll speak with our director. I'll speak with Ms. McGovern, our director of transportation, and Bill, our director of transportation, about that, just to see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Backus. Anything else from members of the committee? Seeing none, at this time, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the superintendent's budget as proposed. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, and now we will do a roll call vote. Ms. Backus?
Aye.
Ms. Hazelwood?
Aye.
Ms. Kirby Chapman?
Aye.
Mr. Testa?
Aye.
I will vote aye. Proposed budget passes 5-0. Again, just for members of the public, the budget now goes before the City Council on May 20th at City Council Chambers. On to item D, future meetings. The Warwick Special Education Advisory Committee is meeting on April 24th at 6 p.m. The Temporary Advisory Committee for Physical Education is TBD at this time. Thank you, Ms. Tedeschi. The school committee budget hearing, if necessary, that's now going to be called off. That was scheduled for April 30th. We no longer need that. The Warwick School Building Committee is meeting on May 1st at 7:30 a.m. The Fiscal Subcommittee meeting is May 7th at 3:30 p.m. The Policy Subcommittee meeting is at 4:30 p.m. on the same day, May 7th. The next monthly school committee meeting will be held on May 14th at 7 p.m. And the Health and Wellness Subcommittee meeting is scheduled for May 22nd, 2024 at 3 p.m. At this time, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Ms. Backus, seconded by Mr. Testa. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.